Hello there. Hi, I'm Dave Jenkins, a journalist from the UK, and we are about to talk about the history of turntablism. I've got some decorated turntablists with me right here. We've got one of the original DMC world champions from 1987, Chad Jackson. We've got 4 times, yes, a round of applause for each one of them. We've got 4 times world DMC champion, Mr. Switch, and 3 times UK DMC champion, JFB. Excellent, and we're just going to look over the last kind of 30 years, 40 years of turntablism really, and see how it's come and see where it's going, most importantly. And I've asked everybody to pick some of their favourite clips, really, some of their favourite routines which really kind of capture the essence of turntablism. So I think we're going to start really with Chad Jackson, and tell us about your favourite clip that you picked, and then we're going to watch it then on the video just for a minute or two.
Well, making a choice between the amount of incredible turntablism stuff that there is out there now is a really difficult thing. But I've kind of gone back to basics, really. The kind of DJing and turntablism and skills that I like is guys and girls who can rock the party, basically, you know. I mean, you might be an incredible turntablist, but you might not be able to rock a party in a club. And one of my good old friends is, for me, one of the best party rockers in the business, and he's an incredible turntablist. And he's as tight as a computer, for me, with the way he keeps the rhythm and doesn't miss a beat. It's my man, Jazzy Jeff.
Yes. Cool, VT guy, please roll.
Break it down, Jeff. Billy, make some noise for DJ Jazzy Jeff one time. Come on, y'all. Here we go.
Now Peter,
Piper,
pick peppers, but run rock,
rhyme,
Humpty,
Dumpty,
fell
down,
that's his art,
time,
Jackie,
nimble,
what?
nimble,
And he was
quick,
but jam,
Max Mud, Dr. Jax on Jenkins.
Come on. Come on. Yeah.
You all know how to start free. Go!
Woo.
He plays musket, he's a big bad wolf, and you're the
Come on.
He's a big bad wolf in your neighborhood.
Not
Getting but getting good. Getting but getting good. Getting but getting good. Getting but getting good.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Amazing, round of applause for Jazzy Jeff there. Awesome, I see what you mean about not missing a beat. That is just so tight, and it's a lot of traditional techniques there, but incorporated with more newer technology, really. Isn't it?
Honestly, I do a lot of music production, and I've got a clock in my head, and my clock, to him, he's bang on, man. He's bang on. He doesn't miss a tiny little beat, you know.
That's
and
amazing.
I just think, as I said, I mean, he's a party rocker, and also playing with a band there. For me, I remember when we started, and we couldn't even, you know, none of us could even become members of the Musicians Union because DJs weren't respected as kind of musicians like turntablists like we are now. And I had to lie to kind of become a member of the Musicians Union. And now, you know, and very soon after that, DJs started to play with bands. And I love seeing a good band with a good DJ because they so complement the rest of the band, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what Jeff does a lot. And also he's, you know, in the old days when he did stuff with Will Smith, you know, all the live stuff, I mean, that's almost like a kind of set routine that he used to do with Will, you know?
Yeah.
And the way you can just kind of change things up as somebody's talking to him over the mic, like kind of, you know, slow it down, speed it up, do this, do that, which is what you used to do a lot with Will, you know? Yeah. I just think that's a real skill because you're concentrating enough on what you're doing without having to think of it. It's almost like you're using up all your brain power already without having to think of, all right, I've got to do this, and somebody's just told me to do that, you know?
Yeah, amazing.
Jeff,
so that's a really interesting
Jeff's my boy, I love him.
Have DJs been recognised as musicians now? When did that happen? You know, kind of, and that's happened in the last kind of 20 years or so? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if that really, you know, I mean, it's not been very long, you know. And the thing that's freaking me out now is the fact that it's going even further towards you being an actual musician per se, like a drummer or live sample player with the turntables and the mixers with the trigger pads and everything. I mean, it's getting so technical now with the gear that's coming out. I mean, you know, things like the stuff you've got there.
Yeah.
And it's just, for me, it's just coming from all those years back. To me, this is stuff that we never dreamed would happen. I mean, having a turntable without an arm, I mean, that I've just been freaked out by that.
This is future business, isn't it?
I'm just completely freaked out by that, you know?
Cool.
I mean, I'm speechless.
Brilliant, right, okay. In fact, my clip has got a lot of that, really, with the new technology. But first, let's look at Mr. Switch's clip. So who have you picked?
So I've picked DJ Kentaro. And his winning set from 2002. And it's really hard to pick one clip, but for a couple of reasons. So in 2002, he was the first Japanese winner of the championship. And up until that point, like, I think half the titles were won by the USA, and the rest are kind of shared between the UK and some European countries like Germany and Denmark. And he just came in and just did a complete breath of fresh air. I think he won with like a unanimous vote. And when you watch the whole set, he covers loads of different styles of music. He covers house, he covers breakbeat, reggae, he finishes on happy hardcore. Yeah. And you just go, what on earth is happening here? Yeah, and the clip is him just flipping like a simple beat, and there's like just 5 sounds in it, and he just takes them, rearranges them into 17 different arrangements.
Amazing.
And just magical.
I know this is a popular clip because I was going to pick it as well, and so is JFP. Okay, Mr. VT.
Hey yo!
Yeah.
Hey yo!
Yeah.
Hey yo!
Yeah.
Hey yo!
Yeah.
Hey yo! Hey yo! Hey yo!
Yeah.
Hey yo! Hey yo! Hey yo!
Absolutely amazing. Give it up for Kentaro.
It just makes you want to watch the rest of the set, doesn't it? Just go and watch the rest of it.
Excellent, cool. And now let's move on to your clip. So what have you picked, JFB?
I've picked C2C, their winning team, DMC, from, I think, 2005. I think it was 5 or 4. Yeah, I think 5. It was 5. And, yeah, I just picked them because, this clip, because they were the first guys to kind of use a lot of pre-production in the DMCs, but really make everything super, like... basically not worry about the technical, because there's 4 of them, they didn't really need to worry about being so technical, and they just went to simplistic formats between all of them and created, like, made it sound more like proper music, and I just thought it was really good.
Excellent, right, okay, Mr. VT.
Check 1, 2. Make some noise. Make some noise. Make some noise. Make some noise. Make some noise.
is absolutely amazing. That's like a band really playing there, and I think that's got a couple of really cool things to highlight, really. One being the showmanship, which is what Chad was talking about before, really, and I mean, talk about the pre-production as well. When did that start coming into routines, and what is allowed and what isn't allowed, if you know what I mean?
I think the first one I saw was I Emerge, where he had pressed his own vinyl for the DMCs. That was in 2003, 3 or 4.
Yeah, I'm such a nerd. I know all the years.
Yeah, and the thing is with CTC, they were like, because all their scratches are quite. I mean, they're all technically individually amazing, but I think I spoke to one of them and asked him how do they make their routines and stuff, and he was saying we make the track first and then we turn it into a routine. So they would have spent ages, like probably sampling loads of musicians or sampling, samples or whatever, and then building this whole track and then breaking it down into how they can perform the track and make it sound like. Because what they've done is they've done loads of routines like that, but then they've actually released tracks that sound exactly like the routines, but because it's so tight, it can be released. They've even won like Mercury Awards for one of them, and they perform it live like that. And I just think it's amazing how they've managed to individually make it sound so good.
I think that's amazing. That really kind of represents turntablism as musicians, as music, really, there. And the idea of deconstructing something, building something to deconstruct it, to perform it, I think it's mind-blowing.
I'll tell you what it also reminded me of. It was so amazing when I saw that, to see guys using kind of jazz records in a performance, because I don't know about you guys, but for me, turntablism is like a modern form of jazz expressionism, really, with solos and stuff, really, really close. And also the fact that in that routine they used, one of the tracks they used was a Brazilian percussionist called Ayrto. I never thought I'd hear an Ayrto track in a World Championship set, so full marks.
Brilliant, amazing. Right, so we're going to go right ahead now to last year for my pick, mainly because I was going to pick Kentaro as well. But we've got K-Swiss. He's only 14. I think this won the DMC Online Championships. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But this is, I'm picking this because I want you guys to explain what the hell is going on here. So please roll a video. Oh, no, I can watch it.
New technique or a new wave. Everybody needs to understand it. All right, this is the new shit is out.
Insane. That gives me goosebumps. Yeah, give it up for K-Swiss. And that, like all of the routines, that's just a very small segment of just a mind-boggling routine there, really. Now, can you explain what's going on there, where he takes the needle off, but he's still carrying on, and he's got his phone there? I understand that he might have built an app. There's also a fidget spinner in the mix there. What's going on?
So, I don't know the app. I had a chance to chat with him before this year's championships, and it's an app he's working on, which tracks the rotation of the record and transmits that sign. So you go moi, and so that's been. Yeah, so the record rotation gets translated into pitch, and that's getting fed into the mixer. And he's got two. Before that, he's got two records on Lock Groove, where you put a sticker on the record and it knocks the needle back. So one record's got that first tone, and then the other one's got the second. So he's doing the transform scratch on one and then on the other. He's doing drumming while that's happening. And then on the inbuilt what's it called, filter on the mixer. So he's put the widget on that, so it's easier for him to get a deeper manual wobble on it. So so there's 5 or 6 different things going on.
Absolutely amazing. That's incredible. Right, okay, now we're going to strip it right back now to like really, really early routines. And I'm wondering, Chad, when you were in the Champions, because you were in the 86 Championship as well when you came second. And I know that the 1985 DMCs, it was quite controversial because the winner won with a scratch or something like that. And it was never meant as the gold standard of technicality that it is now, really. So back in those early tournaments, what were the most kind of dexterous techniques that people were using? And then I was wondering if you guys could give us an example of kind of early scratches, really, to show where we've come from.
Well, in the early days, really, I mean, the premise of the competition, as far as we knew it as competitors, was, if for want of a better term, it was more club DJ based. So you had to do a set, and it had to flow rhythmically. The beats had to keep going. You know, there was no stopping and starting and doing little kind of trick routines and stuff like that, which people do nowadays. You know, it was about keeping a flow going all the way through, mixing tunes together, as well as doing kind of early cuts and scratches and kind of drop-ins over the top, and also kind of deck-to-deck stuff, kind of early deck-to-deck stuff. But it was very much, it was like if somebody had suddenly stopped and done some crazy routine which interrupted the flow of the tempo, then they may have been marked down, because it was about keeping the tempo going. It was more locked towards being a club DJ rather than the real artistry and kind of turntablism stuff that we have now, you know. I mean, personally, it was a little bit constricting at the time, that, you know, because you had to make sure that you flowed every tune into each other, you know, with a mix, as well as doing tricks and bits of scratches and stuff like that. If we'd have been freed up to just kind of go for it, then maybe things would have started to develop a bit faster in those early days. But, you know, that's just how it was then, you know?
Yeah. It's still, I mean, when you look back, it's still developed really quickly, and there was still quite a lot of kind of trickery and stuff. I mean, when you won as well, there was already kind of moving in that direction.
Yeah, well, it was really the early days, and I must admit, you know, people like myself and others, we kind of felt like, you know, this was some brand new, fresh thing that we were just, it was our world. Like most turntablists, when you get into it, it's like a drug, you know? And we kind of felt like ambassadors that had to try and promote this to the outside world, because there was people kind of coming and watching it and kind of wondering what the hell's going on here, you know? So the showmanship, visual stuff came into it just to try and draw people in and get people interested in what we were doing, you know?
Right, okay.
So that kind of had to happen in a way before it got all really complex, because if it had been really complex at the beginning, people would have just been too freaked out, and it would have been like, I don't understand this. What is this rubbish?
Yeah.
You know?
Cool. So that's, I mean, if there's like one kind of technique that really kind of pushed the art forward for both of you, which one would it be? Or maybe the first one that you learned and spent hours and hours and hours in your room when you knew that, you know, you were getting bitten by the bug, really. What have been the most kind of progressive, or, you know, things that have moved the game on, really? And can you show us as well, if possible?
Probably for me, I'd say the Transformer scratch, because that was probably the first one they did where they were able to cut the sound out, in and out. I think it came before the chirps. Was it before chirps? It was, yeah. And then there's endless patterns you can do with it, and it's not that difficult to.
Can you give us a little example?
Yeah, I suppose.
I think it was because there's a couple of people, like Jazzy Jeff is one of the people who sort of is credited with inventing the Transformer scratch.
Yeah.
Cash
I mean,
Cash Money as well.
Yeah. I mean, talking to the early days as well, I mean, I remember the gear that we got now. I remember when I did the championship, when I won at the Royal Albert Hall, I remember the mixer we were using was about, like, that big, you know? And great big, huge up and down faders, and like a huge crossfader with loads of rotary, like pan pots by the side of it, that you kept hitting your hand on. So you had to try and handle all this stuff as well as trying to do a decent set, you know. So things have just changed immeasurably since then.
And you just had to like use and abuse the mixers, whereas now
Yeah.
you can
They're
change
made
the
for
crossfader
it.
to do the transform scratch. You had to use like the line switches and just try and
exactly.
get that quick sound out.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So show us the transformer. Amazing, amazing. Hey. Cool, and that all comes about then, that's through cutting out the sound, so it's what you're not hearing rather than what you're hearing in a way.
Yeah, it's defined by the gaps, and also it doesn't have a straight sound. It's just about that technique of just generating regular rhythms, and you just hear like loads of different patterns.
Yeah, so basically, as long as you tap the fader in time, you can do any kind of like movement with the vinyl or whatever, and the actual tapping of the fader is what keeps it in time, which is why it was such a effective.
I remember
do any melody there or anything really, can't you?
I remember practicing trying to get your speed up with the transformer kind of scratching, where you try and kind of do this as fast as you could, you know, just a little.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what about the next one then? The next kind of, something that a trick or a technique that really kind of pushes through. And I'd like you to give an example this time.
Have you got like a beat I can do like a little juggle on? So the thing that really caught my imagination was beat juggling. Because when I started watching these videos, the DJs would take this two copies of the same record, and from the original days where it would be looping that record because you didn't have a loop station so you wanted to manually loop the breakup of the track and get the b-boys dancing. And through the competition, I'd say in particular, that kind of evolved into beat juggling. So rather than just taking it, looping it over and over, you can say, okay, well, I can loop it faster, and maybe I can start to change the beat. And it really looks like juggling, so you can start to... you have the kick, the hi-hat, and the snare, and you say, okay, well, I want to have kick, snare, hi-hat, and you can just jump to those bits. I mean, now you can also do that through you can do that on home producing software. You can do it using cue points in the mixer. But that was what was really interesting for me. You could change the beat in front of you, and make it visual, like what Kintaro is doing, and add all these other flares, add like body tricks, and just had a whole other level into it. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can do some beat juggling.
Amazing. I've always wondered, because I never got a beat mix, but I never was able to. I'm not clever enough, or didn't have enough patience to be able to take it anywhere near the level that you guys have. But I've always wondered, how do you know which, if you're bringing in the snare or bringing in the hi-hat, or how are your cue points? How do you make it look so...
Stickers on the records. So,
I can see the black marks there.
Yeah, so when I read like the manuals, so you could either choose to put stickers on the record and have like 12 o'clock, or have like the sticker in line with the needle. And then from that, so if you have like 12 o'clock, you have the kick, and then at 2 o'clock you have a hi-hat, and then forward a snare. And then you just develop muscle memory and just play around and say, okay, I need to do this to pull back to the kick, push forward to the snare. And when you take the fader off, you're basically winding the other track. So the fader's on the left, you're winding back on the right. When it's playing the right, you're winding back on the left.
Amazing, amazing. Now, we're looking at the Rane 12s there. Most of you will notice that there is no needle, and Chad mentioned it earlier on. And I wanted to talk about kind of technology, really, and how that has pushed the art forward. And there was a really interesting DMC in 1992 where they suddenly let in everything. It was open format. Somebody played a bass. There were some people playing on really early then on CD turntables and things like that. But then, because of Cuba, I believe it was, they just realised, actually, no, we just need to take it right back to the original 2 turntables and a mixer. But what, for you guys, has really kind of pushed the art on in terms of kind of technological developments, like the kit that we're seeing here, compared to the traditional technology?
Well, what I found interesting, because I judged the championships since I won them, and I found it interesting that a lot of DJs, since I emerged in 2004, started pressing their own records, because Serato and Tractor and systems like that had started to become the thing you used. So rather than DJs going out and buying the records to perform in the championships, they were doing them on Serato and making their own routines and then pressing them to vinyl, which was kind of bizarre. And then when I think in 2011, they let in DVS to all the championships, and it wasn't like you have to use DVS. You can now use DVS. You can use vinyl, and I think every competitor bar one did the switch. So
wow.
it was really interesting. So the DJs have kind of been clamouring for it to come into the competition.
Yeah,
which I found really interesting.
yeah. Because that was talked about for a long time before that was finally accepted, really, wasn't it?
It was massively debated, and the whole thing of can you use MIDI? And I think there was a thing you can't use external, but you can use inbuilt MIDI. And no one was really sure quite what to do with it and how far do you open the championship out, because it started as 2 turntables and a mixer, and what can you do with those?
Yeah.
And it's kind of been the bedrock of pushing that and then starting to bring in this other technology.
I'm really interested in who was the one DJ who didn't move over to DVS. Can you remember who that was and why they did it?
I can't remember. I don't remember if he qualified for the evening, so I don't know.
Excellent. How about for you? What technology has really pushed things on in that way?
That would be the DVS, really, of Serato.
How about...
Pretty much what he said.
Yeah. How about in terms of mixes and things like that, like the way that it's opened out with the online championship, where you can do what K-Swiss was doing and have an incredible, mind-blowing setup where you can just do... your imagination is your only limitation.
Yeah, well, what was it? The Rane TTM57 was the first one that had Serato built into it. So before you'd have to have like a sound card box and then plug that into your mixer via the turntables and laptop, and now most mixers have Serato built in. But the new Rane 72's got all basically everything that's come out now. So it's
amazing. So that is literally plug and play then. So you haven't got that, because there's that awful changeover in a club when somebody's setting up and things like that. But if you've got mixers like that, then you literally just put your computer in and bang, there you go. Amazing. How about you?
I'll tell you what, man, for me, I mean, those turntables without an arm, man, I mean,
it's magic.
From where I come from, way back, we never dreamed we'd ever see those, man. I mean, I'm gobsmacked. I'm just like, wow, I can't, I'm almost speechless, you know. And all the technology that the guys have got access to now, the mixers and those turntables and whatever, one thing that I feel is that it's now, I think, going to become a really difficult job for DMC and Rane, for people like picking the right judges, because how do you know what somebody's doing? I mean, I've as well as teaching DJ skills and music production to students like Jonathan First, one of the champions, and I understand music production techniques and effects and this, that and the other, as well as the DJ stuff. And watching the championships that were a couple of weeks ago, even I'm finding difficulties kind of following some of what people are doing on the actual mixer. So I think there's going to become a real problem with the judges actually being able to know what people are doing. I think what's going to have to happen is there's going to have to be a camera right above the mixer so you can actually see what people are triggering, as well as, you know. I mean, I think that's probably got to happen, because otherwise the judges aren't really going to be able to see what's going on, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if you're, or you pick a particular judge for a particular style.
Well, it's things like, you know, obviously most of the judges are turntablists, but it's also the music production stuff. I mean, if certain guys are using delays and effects and reverbs and stuff like that, I want to actually see that happening, you know? I want to, because it's fascinating, you know? But if you don't quite know what's going on with your ears, you know, kind of knowing all those music production type things, then how are you going to know exactly what the DJ is doing to be able to score them right? So, you know, I think it's becoming a real minefield for judges, really.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm wondering now, in terms of kind of, you know, I mean, you mentioned about like the showmanship, kind of bringing people in and into the turntablism, or the, you know, kind of understanding the craft of turntablism. And I think you mentioned, is it body moves or something like that? You used
body tricks, yeah.
Body tricks. So have there been any particular routines where you've thought that's taken it too far? That's not quite, that's not in keeping with the craft, or it's a bit gimmicky? And I found one, it was from 1992, I believe, DJ Tommy. He didn't win. He did this amazing thing where he's scratching with his feet, and then right at the end as the finale, he pulled his foot up, and it was like a trick vinyl, and it comes out as a concertina. And it just didn't, I mean, it almost worked, but it didn't as well, because he made it look like it was a mistake, but then the concertina didn't quite pull up, and it was half magic, half turntablism, but didn't quite tick either box. But, I mean, have you seen any, and I'm not asking you to name names, you don't have to if you don't want, but have you seen any where you're just like, no, that's just pushed it too far, it's jumped the shark, as they say?
There's so many dotted over the years. I don't think there's been any, like, champions.
There's a guy in 87 who used a snooker cue. That was just stupid.
Yeah, what was his name? There's one guy called Sir Scratch from the Philippines. I remember because he was on the same video as Kentaro. He was the first DJ, and he was scratching some white noise and pulled out a giant saw and started like pretend sawing some wood in half. I was like, okay, yeah, I can roll with that.
There was, I think there was one daytime eliminations where some guy pulled out a pair of nunchucks and started doing the nunchucks. And what was it? Swifty's laptop was right next to it, and there's a bit where he like smashes the laptop with the nunchucks.
Ooh. Yeah. Was his laptop okay? I need closure.
I think so, yeah.
Stay tuned to find out.
Cool. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned with the snooker cue. I mean, because then that was really early on, really. And I mean, that was quite revolutionary to pull off stuff like that, wasn't it? Wasn't there an American football in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, that was all me. Sorry. I mean, sorry, you know. But as I said before, the reasons for that was just to try and promote this new art form, really, you know, to people who just couldn't understand what you were doing, really. You know, even in those early days where we look at stuff, you know, stuff from the early days now, and compared to what's going on nowadays, you know, it's like, oh, that's pretty basic, you know. But obviously everything moves on. But at the time, that was pretty complex for people to see. They were like, what's going on? What is this, you know?
Amazing. So, I mean, how about the future? How far can we take this? You know, are there things, what are you working on at the moment? Or, do you know, you get these kind of epiphanies where you feel like, you know, you've done something new. It must be harder. The deeper you get into it, the more technical you get. It must be harder to impress yourself or, you know, kind of excite yourself with new things. So, what do you want to achieve in the future, or what would you like to see from the art form of turntablism, really? We'll start with you and work our way around, Jay.
Sorry, my mind's just gone blank because I just thought of a really stupid idea, which I'm not going to do.
Small things with the 12s.
Yeah.
Because we did a video together, and
yes, it's
I'm always promoting misuse of equipment where possible. And, like, because we did a video with 3 Ranes, and JFB scratched it with his head and then his foot. And we just kind of thought, what's the craziest things we can do with them? Because you can just turn it upside down, and you don't have to worry about, is the needle going to stay on it? You can just flip it upside down and scratch with it if you want to. Amazing.
I'm really intrigued at what your idea was, because you've had some type of brainwave.
I think this is the time to get it out.
No. It's
it's filthy.
Cool. I mean, where would you like to see it go in the future then? You know, where? Because I mean, it always feels like you've taken it as far as you can, but it never is. It's endless, isn't it?
Well, I was thinking. I mean, obviously, you know, I knew I was coming to do this thing today, and it's been on my mind for a couple of days. And one thought that came to my mind was, I remember when we all started in those early days. You know, it was basically 2 turntables and a mixer, even though the mixer was like a mile long, and it was basically what you could do on those 2 turntables and a crossfader, basically. And a lot of guys nowadays are still doing a lot of stuff with just 2 turntables and a crossfader, you know. But what they're doing now is just so light years ahead of what we were doing then. What fascinates me is, if then we could have seen a video going forward in time to what people are doing now, would that have made us realise that there's actually a lot more that we can do with this, and would it have stepped the art form up? I've just had this weird thought the other night of like,
It would probably
how
tear
things
a hole in the
progress
space-time
exponentially
continuum.
and how they kind of naturally, how the natural evolution of things are, and how these things get stepped up a bit, if you like. With, you know, like in evolution, you get alterations in physical form and stuff, which become the norm. You know, I've just had this thing on my mind of where else. Quite often we reach the point with turntablism. Like I remember a few years ago, a lot of friends of mine, like Swifty and people like that, were chatting and we're basically saying, you know, where can it go from here? It's like surely there's nowhere left for it to go. But it always like hoodwinks us. And yes, there is further places to go. You know, and with all the stuff like the no arms on the turntable, I mean that's just opening things up completely now for me. You know.
Yeah. I think you raised an interesting point on using things the way they shouldn't be used, and that's pretty much the whole basis of everything that's an Amsterdam dance event. Is, you know, all music, really electronic music, especially stuff like kind of jungle and hip hop with sampling, is all made through things being used in the way that they weren't intended for. Like the acid sound on a 303 was never meant to happen, and stuff like that, really. And what's your kind of favourite happy accident, really, when you've been trying stuff and you've realised, well, okay, like it's almost taken you by surprise in that type of way? Can you think of anything within your own routine?
Happy accident.
Sorry, that one part of the set questions. We've gone off-piste here now.
It's quite tricky. I mean, so when I put my routines together, I'll be listening for tracks, and similarly to finding the break, I'll hear a bit of a track and think, okay, I know what I can do with that. So one classic thing is like if you have a track in 3/4 time, say, you can add a baby scratch and make it 4/4, and that kind of that stepping stone leads you to building a whole routine, and that's like how I made my final routine in my 2014 winning set. And I could only make that routine with that particular track. So when I stumble across those bits that goes, oh yeah, I've got an idea on how it can be flipped.
Wow.
Like the live spin on
cool.
it. Yeah.
So that's like the kind of seed that sparks it, really, that sparks the whole routine. How long does it take for your routines? I was watching your freestyle one, a 3-star one, the other day, and when you go into like the fresh prints and stuff like that, and there's just so much going on, so much, and especially with that, like, you know, that was a 15-minute routine. How long does it take to put these things together, and how much of it is improvisation, and how much of it is, you know, kind of diligence, pure diligence for however long?
Sometimes like an hour, and sometimes months.
Wow.
How long did the three-star set take, do you reckon?
I spent about about a week and a half. But quite a lot of that week and a half on it.
Yeah, that's probably like 12 hours a day, every day for the week and a half, is it, or something like that?
Yeah, a good 6 hours a day, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my 2014 sets, the last routine I'd come up with 4 years ago, and I didn't use it for that championship. So the reason I entered was because I had that, and because I knew it had that kind of winning edge to it, for want of a better word.
Wow.
And then I kind of built the rest of the routine from other ideas. The Run DMC routine I made in 2011 for a video. And then the rest of it is kind of getting a routine to join those two together. Right. And then just before the World Final, I think spending 2 to 3 weeks, stack of microwavable meals, not leaving the house, practicing it until I'm bored of it, and just going through the cycle. 6 minutes.
So that's really interesting. You have like a vocabulary then of little things which you can put in. If you've been practicing, if you've been doing it for years, then you can bring in little things that you've done before, which I guess you just remember then. Or once you've performed your routine, you've won, or you haven't, but you've probably won, knowing you guys. Then does it just leave, like, you know, when you cram for an exam and then you do your exam and then that's it, it's gone, it's out of your head? Or does it stay with you forever because you've been practicing it so much?
It depends if you want to use it later for other stuff, because I've done routines for competitions, and then straight after the competition realised I don't actually like that routine anymore, and or it's too messy to use in a club type thing. But then I've done other ones where I can reuse and revamp. But those ones which I use for club gigs and stuff like that, I practice like at least once a week to keep it refreshed.
Yeah, I mean, what's the influence on club? Because you all play club gigs as well. And that's, you know, there's routines are one thing, but then if we're talking about the history of turntablism, actually incorporating it. And I've seen you smash a dance fairly recently, and there's so many different genres in there and stuff. I mean, that's kind of like a whole other conversation, really, the aspect of keeping the art form in there, but also keeping the club flow in is, you know, a whole other thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, you spice up your club sets with little bits of stuff, you know. But, excuse me, on the whole, you're there to rock the crowd. You're there to rock the party, you know. You're not there to show off, or you're not there to kind of, you know, necessarily give an exhibition kind of set, you know, or else more often than not you'll find people walking off the dance floor because they're not there to watch an exhibition set. They're there to dance and get in the groove and have a good time, you know. So, but the turntablism definitely helps because you can just spice things up a bit, you know, and it's not. Should we say you can always make sure it doesn't get boring because you can just do something, you know, just to reignite their enthusiasm, I suppose.
Definitely. Well, I hope that we've reignited or ignited or maintained your enthusiasm. Thank you very much for listening. Has anybody got any questions for these three amazing DJs here? We've got about 5 minutes left.
One thing I just wanted to add before the questions is what this is all about. I just wanted a bit of advice for you younger guys. Watch your tendons over the years. Keep your health. Take vitamins and stuff to keep your tendons okay. Because I've kind of got a bit of RSI and stuff from the hours and hours of practicing, and also using a mouse and things like that. I mean, talking as we were about the hours of practice that you have to do, it's excessive. So, just from an old fart's perspective, look after your tendons, man. Look after them.
So, what's been incredible to me, kind of seeing how turntablism has evolved, is essentially the Red Bull 3 style is now a 15-minute DMC. And so, I mean, especially just seeing like the loads of talent from this week's 3 style, just phenomenal. What do you think is next? I mean, you have guys like A-Track that are kind of bringing it down to more of like the bare bones now, like classic DMC, but still like where you can get really innovative. But yeah, just with the technology that we have now as DJs, I mean, the Rane 12, Rane 72 is phenomenal, but I can't even envision what the next thing would be.
I don't know if any of us can until it arrives, really, and it's mad. Yeah.
Or maybe something that, like maybe you've wanted in like putting together a routine, like, oh man, like this is something that, like, that you wouldn't have seen, right? That now that you see in this mixer and this setup, but maybe something that has been like a spark in your head, like, wow, what if there was this? Whether it's a technique or maybe even just like a feature.
Going back to like the Goldie Awards, I think what's really nice about that is they are kind of moving away from the DMC because you have a lot of DMC DJs entering the Red Bull and doing the Goldie Awards, but they're becoming their own thing. The Red Bull is foremost a party rocking, and that's nice because it opens out. You don't have to be a mega fast scratch DJ to enter it, and you know you have to play different genres and stuff like that. And also a lot with the Goldie Awards, you have people coming in and doing like a lot of like mashing beat producing live with the set. And I think I'd like to see it merge towards that. Like we're watching C2C doing like a whole musical set with 4 or 5 DJs on 5 turntables. And maybe seeing a bit of that coming into like individual sets, people like producing songs live and going like that kind of, I think that's kind of a good way to go because you kind of do that thing of what do I want to get in there in terms of technique, what sounds do I actually want to produce? You know, you can actually, in this kind of day and age, from mashing up records from the start of DMC, you're now in this position where you can create any sounds you want, virtually using any equipment, and you just have it all at your disposal.
I guess it's that move towards more and more musicality, really, and using them more and more as instruments.
Problem is with that though is that people don't understand how it's made, and a lot of people don't like the fact that you've made something beforehand to do it with because they think for some reason they think it's like cheating.
That's really weird because you've put in the effort and you've created it on your own anyway, so it's all part of the performance. That's really strange. I think we've probably got enough time to squeeze one more question in. Yep, we got a question.
There you go. Yeah, one question. Why? Why turntablism? You know, what made you choose that route from the early days of when you guys started and first steps in your career? Why not production? Why not club DJing? Why turntablism? What was the single thing that turned you on there?
Well, being the oldest here, from way back, it was all that and more. I mean, turntablism for me was just, I was already a musician. I played the piano, drums, etc. I'd already started to get into music production. I was doing kind of live mixes for the radio up in Manchester, over in the UK. Turntablism was just the latest form of musical expression that caught my kind of interest, really, you know. To me, it wasn't anything different from being a musician playing any other instrument, you know, or music production. It was all just interconnected, really. That's why, for me, all this new technology and the fact that, like you say, people are actually, like musicians, performing live now in a real sense. For me, that's like holy grail that I've always been looking for and searching for to see and be involved in, you know.
Amazing. Right, we're getting like signs to wrap it up. So in one word, why?
Different to anything else.
That was 3 words. One word.
Fidgeting.
Excellent. Please give these guys a round of applause.